Deputy Michael McNamara.
Thank you.
To amendments 2, 20 and 24.
Yes, thank you. If, in effect, these amendments give Parliament, or the Oireachtas, the Dáil and the Seanad, the power to scrutinise the regulations that the Minister makes. I believe that's very important. I've spoken on this, as have many members of this House, on the importance of parliamentary scrutiny. I spoke on it in second stage. I cited an expert who appeared before the COVID-19 committee, of which you were once a member, Minister, and I cited legal academics in Ireland who cited the importance of that in a democracy and the fact that that was being diminished, at the very least, by the approach taken in the making of regulations to date. I have proposed similar amendments to this myself in the past, therefore, as indeed have Sinn Féin, therefore I'm happy to support Deputy Cullinan's amendment. But, you know, there's I suppose, a philosophical reason why it's very important that any regulations that you make are scrutinised adequately by this House. But there are even more practical reasons why it's important that we have that scrutiny. And I want to go into those practical reasons to reinforce the importance of this amendment and to urge people to support this amendment. Minister, as you well know, this bill proposes to roll over the Health Amendment No. 2 Act of earlier this year, which was brought in July, which was effectively the act which facilitated COVID passes. In that act, you were given the power to introduce, by regulation, and a regulation that the Dáil can't scrutinise. Yes, it can annul it, or it can leave it in place, but it can't actually debate it, it can't actually scrutinise it, and it can't propose any amendments to it. But in that act, you were given the power to introduce regulations requiring proof of immunity. And proof of immunity was actually defined in the Parent Act, in the act passed democratically by this House. One I opposed because I feared it would be abused. And unfortunately, I believe that it has been, because proof of immunity is set out as an EU COVID certificate, A, B, a document, as may be prescribed in written or electronic form, issued by a body implementing a vaccination programme, howsoever described. Or C, any form of written information or proof verifying in such manner as may be prescribed in relation to the person to whom the document is issued that the person has recovered from COVID-19. So, therefore, this Act envisages three types of proofs of immunity: an EU COVID pass, a vaccine cert, or proof of recovery. Now, the reason that I say that's important is because you, of course, have never given any mention of proof of recovery in the regulations which you've introduced. You've merely confined it to a COVID pass, which, of course, an EU COVID pass, which, of course, was introduced a lot earlier in the year when a lot less was known about immunity. And it was introduced for a specific purpose only, and that was to facilitate travel between member states. And of course, for those who don't have proof of vaccination or can't prove recovery within a tight period of 6 months, they can get an antigen test to enter most EU member states, or in the very special case of Ireland, they can get a PCR test. And that enables them to travel freely. But that will not enable them to access facilities in Ireland, because you, by regulation, notwithstanding that it was clearly envisaged in the bill that proof of recovery would be included, you, by regulation, have limited it to proof of vaccination or a COVID pass, and a COVID pass only facilitates recovery within the last 6 months. Now, that itself is quite important, because NPHET, at a meeting on the 11th of November, the chair of the Irish Epidemiological Modelling Advisory Group, quite a mouthful, confirmed that natural immunity is built into and explicit in his modelling. As is standard for these models, infection-induced immunity is assumed to be permanent. So NPHET modelling that all of these measures that you introduce are introduced in response to is assuming that immunity is permanent. You received, when this was being introduced, now that is a step forward, the idea that immunity is permanent, or any assumption that immunity is permanent, but that is, and sorry, I'm not plucking this out of the sky, I'm plucking this from the published minutes of the NPHET meeting of the 11th of November. So they're modelling on the basis that immunity is permanent. When you introduced this bill that you're now looking to roll over to the House in July, the advice was that immunity was at least 9 months. And of course, COVID was more recent in July than it is now, so less was known about the duration of immunity. But notwithstanding knowing that immunity was in place for 9 months, you limited COVID passes to persons who had recovered within 6 months. Now, why was that done? Well, that was done to keep people safe, to keep premises safe, etc. But when asked, and I have asked you, where is the evidence that COVID passes make premises safe? And the Taoiseach, who is a medical doctor, I don't know how relevant that is, a lot of people think it's relevant, so he is a medical doctor. He was asked the same question in the Seanad, and he said, at the very least, they have encouraged more and more people to get vaccinated. I'm not sure we would have reached so high a level of vaccination as 93 or 94% were it not for the COVID pass system. There is good evidence that countries that have it have higher levels of vaccination. At the very least, it has worked on this level, if it has not perhaps been as effective as we hoped in terms of transmission. It has certainly been effective in encouraging people to get vaccinated. So, was the COVID pass, as I asked at the time, about encouraging people to get vaccinated? Was it about coercing people to get vaccinated? Or was it about keeping premises safe? Because the purpose of the legislation, the only power that you have to introduce passes, is to make a premise more safe. Not to coerce people or encourage people, depending on, I suppose, how you view it, not to treat the livelihoods of people who work in the hospitality sector, people who work in bars, up and down the length and breadth of this country, not to treat their livelihoods as collateral damage in an attempt to encourage people to get vaccinated, but rather to make the particular premises safer. And I haven't seen any evidence yet that these COVID passes are making premises safer. And the Taoiseach has only cited that they have worked to encourage people to get vaccinated. But the selfsame Minister, Taoiseach and medical doctor today has said that we might need a 4th booster to make us safe from the latest variant, Omicron. So, will you introduce, because I ask you this now because I won't have the power and this Dáil won't have the power to ask you these questions later, because there is no power to scrutinise the regulations you bring in. Deputy Cullinane is proposing that we have that power. I'm supporting that because it's important, because we won't be able to ask you in a couple of days' time, or a couple of weeks' time, or a couple of months' time this question. So I'm asking now, as we consider whether to vote on the amendment, I'm asking you, will it be possible that you will require a booster in order to have a COVID pass, or that you'll require 2 boosters to have a COVID pass? You see, Minister, I think it's very important that you answer that question. If you're not going to agree to an amendment that will enable us to scrutinise that, if and when you bring in regulations requiring it, then I think you need to answer that question now. Is this about giving yourselves the power to change COVID passes to require further booster shots, one more booster shot, two more booster shots? Sorry, I'm not plucking this out of the sky. I'm plucking it from what the Taoiseach, a member of the cabinet in which you serve, and a medical doctor has said, and also what he has said on the record of the upper house of this Parliament. So, and I'm also asking, when are you going to acknowledge immunity from recovery? Because it's provided for in the law you introduced, Minister, the law you're now proposing to roll over. It seems to be provided for in the science, or at least the science proposed by those that advise you and those that you introduce regulations in response to, who have said, as is standard for these models, infection-induced immunity is assumed to be permanent. Now, I hadn't read, I have to say, and I tried to keep abreast of some of the reports in, for example, the Lancet and the British Medical Journal and places like that. I hadn't read any saying it was permanent. I had read reports saying it was enduring. So if it is enduring, at the very least, or permanent, as the NEFID modelling is based on, are predicated upon, then why, if these people who have recovered are immune or enjoy a degree of immunity at least as great as, if not greater than, vaccinated persons, because we now know, notwithstanding your criticism of Deputy Verona Murphy when she talked about a Lancet report suggesting that vaccine-based immunity waned over time, and it seems that some vaccines wane faster than others, but we know they wane. So why are they being given a pass to enter a premises in order to keep it safe, when we know that their immunity is waning, but somebody whose immunity is more enduring can't enter the premises? Because that is not about public safety. That is about encouraging people to get a vaccine. That is about coercing people to get a vaccine. And that is about holding up the livelihoods of everybody who works in that sector as collateral for your crusade. And I use the word crusade advisedly because, you know, the Crusaders believed that they were fighting for a glorious cause, a better future, bringing enlightenment to the savages that they met along the way and converting them by force if necessary, by coercion if necessary. That was a good thing. Now, we might view it a little bit differently with the benefit of hindsight, but we might equally view this a little bit differently with the benefit of hindsight. So I ask simply, Minister, that you say whether or not you will contemplate requiring a third booster or a fourth in order to have a COVID pass, and you answer why immunity which acquired from recovery from COVID more than 6 months ago is not included. And lastly, and I think it's important to finally raise this issue because, again, unless this amendment is accepted, we won't have the possibility to raise it again, and that is persons who can't take a vaccine. And Minister, I received an email from a concerned constituent, one I know, so it's not, and I know her daughter as well that was the subject of her email. So it's not, you know, somebody who made this up to score a point. It's a real person in a real difficulty. And she said her daughter has been diagnosed with autism. At the outset, I wish to stress I am not anti-vaccination and I support the vaccination programme, is what she said. As a family, we have strictly adhered to all public health guidelines throughout the pandemic. Unfortunately, because of a previous adverse reaction to a vaccine, we were advised not to get our daughter vaccinated. Based on the completion of a benefit-risk analysis, we feel that this is the correct decision. However, the recent extension of COVID-19 passes beyond the hospitality sector has posed significant difficulties for our daughter. She now feels excluded and marginalised in society. There are many challenges. She can't go to the cinema, she can't have lunch in a cafe or a restaurant, she can't attend a concert, She can't attend teenage discos with her friends or go to the theatre. She's reluctantly accepted these exclusions, but swimming is something she uses as a form of exercise and sensory therapy. This has now been taken from her. I would be interested to know how many COVID-19 outbreaks can be attributed to gyms or swimming pools. For a lot of people, the benefit of regular exercise goes beyond the physical benefits. It's frequently used to help reduce anxiety. There's some medical evidence to show that regular exercise can be as effective in treating anxiety and milder cases of depression as antidepressants. Given the steep rise in mental health issues and the difficulties accessing help due to lengthy waiting lists, restricting people's access to gyms and swimming pools should surely only be done as a last resort. Another concern is hairdressers. If COVID-19 passes are extended to hairdressers, the girl who's named in the email I received will be unable to get her hair cut. This might seem like a very trivial issue to many, but has sensory issues, so she needs to have her hair cut regularly. She's also concerned that COVID passes could be extended to after-school extracurricular activities such as speech and drama and dance classes. Dr. Tony Holohan, during a recent press conference, encouraged business to introduce the use of COVID-19 passes if they wished. The whole COVID-19 pass system is having a negative impact on their daughter's mental health. This is in addition to the whole vilification of unvaccinated people. It would appear that we are no longer all in this together. As a family, we have exercised our way through the tough days of this pandemic, walking, hiking and swimming. Our daughter's ability to access the swimming pool has removed a vital component of our mental health and wellness toolkit. I would respectfully request that you consider raising these issues with the Minister for Health. So, Minister, in addition to those who have recovered, in addition to the whole issue of expanding the COVID pass, and I'm asking you to rule it out again, I reiterate, because I won't be able to ask these questions. Nobody in this House will be able to ask these questions if this amendment isn't accepted, and I've no doubt but that you're going, well, maybe you'll surprise me, but it really would come as a surprise if you said you were going to accept any scintilla of parliamentary scrutiny of your performance and the regulations which you pass, and we're approaching Christmas, like a Caesar in the time of our Lord. Beyond question, beyond reproach, just this is what will happen, and pass it down to the provinces and let them do it. So, Minister, will you consider persons who have medical advice not to be vaccinated, as this girl has, that they won't be subject to these COVID pass system, the recovered, and finally, will you rule out that it will be extended into the future to require boosters and more boosters and more boosters? Thank you.